My name is Emily, 32 years old, and I thought I knew my husband better than I knew myself. For 7 years, we built a life together. Laughter, love, and quiet promises whispered under dim kitchen lights. I believed him when he said trust was everything. Until that Friday night, standing outside room 714 of the Hilton, I realized trust can also be a weapon. It was supposed to be a surprise. Daniel had told me he was on a 3-day work trip, meetings, presentations, deadlines. But something in his tone had changed lately. He sounded distracted, distant, rehearsed. I brushed it off for weeks, convincing myself I was just overthinking. Still, that night, something inside me refused to stay silent. I packed an overnight bag, bought his favorite champagne, and drove 4 hours just to see the smile I missed. By the time I reached the hotel, the lobby lights were soft and gold, the air scented with expensive perfume. I remember checking in under the excuse of a birthday visit. The receptionist smiled kindly. "Room 714, she said. "Your husband's been here since yesterday." Her words twisted something in my stomach, not because of what she said, but how she said it. Hesitant. Unsure. I stood outside his door with my heart pounding like a drum. My hand shook as I adjusted my coat, clutching the small gift box in my palm, a silver watch engraved with "Forever Yours," a symbol of loyalty that was about to mean nothing. Behind the door, I heard muffled sounds. A laugh, soft, unfamiliar, and definitely not his. Then a woman's voice. Low, teasing. My breath caught in my throat. For a second, I froze. Maybe it's the TV, I thought. Maybe I'm wrong. But the laughter grew clearer. The kind of laugh a woman makes when she's comfortable, when she's with someone who isn't a stranger. My chest tightened. My instinct screamed at me to walk away, to pretend I never came. But love makes fools of us all. I raised my hand and knocked, softly at first. No answer. Then again, louder. Silence. I could hear whispers now, hurried, panicked. Then a shuffle. A door latch clicked, slow and cautious. Daniel opened the door halfway, surprise flashing across his face. Not the good kind, not the "my wife surprised me" kind. This was different. His eyes widened, lips parted, and his voice came out shaky. What are you doing here? What am I doing here? The question echoed in my head like thunder. I smiled weakly, holding up the champagne. "Surprising you," I said. Then I saw her. Over his shoulder. A woman in his shirt, her hair messy, eyes wide, frozen in place. The room smelled of perfume I didn't own. There were 2 wine glasses on the nightstand, one still half full. My hand went cold around the bottle neck. Daniel stepped forward, blocking my view. "This isn't what it looks like," he blurted, his voice trembling. I let out a small, humorless laugh. "Then tell me what it is, Daniel. Tell me why she's wearing your shirt." He looked at me, searching for words that wouldn't exist. Every second stretched longer, heavier, crueler. My heart pounded so loud I could barely hear him mutter something about a misunderstanding. But the truth was already standing right there, wrapped in white cotton and guilt. The woman, Sophie, I would later learn, avoided my gaze, clutching the sheet like it could hide her shame. But I wasn't angry at her. Not yet. My eyes stayed on Daniel, the man I gave everything to, the man who used to hold my face like it was the only truth in the world. Something in me shattered, quietly. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, the champagne bottle slipping from my hand, landing softly on the carpet. The box with the watch pressed into my palm until my skin burned. "I drove 4 hours to surprise you," I whispered, my voice barely holding. Guess the surprise was mine. Daniel took a step forward, desperate. "Emily, please." But I was already backing away. My legs moved before my heart caught up. I turned down the hallway, every step echoing in the emptiness between us. Behind me, I heard the door close, not fast, not loud, just final. As the elevator door shut, I caught my reflection, pale, hollow-eyed, unrecognizable. The woman staring back at me wasn't naive anymore. She was broken. But somewhere beneath that pain, a seed of something colder began to grow. Because in that silence, one thought burned clearer than the rest. If he could betray me this easily, then he never knew who I really was. And soon neither would he. I met Daniel when I was 24, a lifetime ago, it feels now. Back then, he wasn't the confident, polished man people know today. He was just a struggling architect with dreams too big for the world to take seriously. I still remember that first encounter at a mutual friend's barbecue. He spilled iced tea all over my white dress, stammered through apologies, and tried to fix it with napkins that only made things worse. I laughed instead of scolding him, and maybe that laughter was where it all began, the kind that makes two strangers feel like they've known each other for years. He had this spark in his eyes, a mix of ambition and chaos, that drew me in. I was working in marketing back then, already climbing my way up, proud of my independence. But Daniel, he was a dreamer. He talked about buildings that would touch the clouds, spaces that made people feel. I loved that about him, his vision, his hunger, the way he made me believe that ordinary life could still be extraordinary. We started small. Late-night dinners at cheap diners, long walks in the city, conversations that lasted until sunrise. He'd always say, "Emily, one day, we'll have everything." Not because we got lucky, but because we didn't give up. I believed him. Maybe that was my first mistake, believing that love alone could make dreams come true. 2 years later, he proposed. Not with fireworks or fancy words, just a ring he could barely afford and a trembling voice that said, "I don't have much now, but if you stand by me, I'll make sure you never regret it." I remember crying, not because of the promise, but because I already felt like I had everything. We got married in a small ceremony behind my parents' house. There was no orchestra, no designer gown, just friends, family, and vows whispered between laughter and tears. The early years were beautiful. We lived in a cramped apartment that smelled faintly of coffee and paint. Mornings began with rushed kisses and burnt toast. Nights ended with dreams scribbled on paper napkins. We had nothing, yet somehow it felt like more than enough. Daniel worked long hours trying to establish his firm, and I handled the bills, the home, the little details that kept us afloat. When his first project finally got approved, a small library in the suburbs, he came home and lifted me off the ground, spinning me around until we both collapsed laughing. That night, he told me, "This is just the start, Em. I'll make you proud." I told him he already had. A few years later, when his company began to grow, things changed, subtly at first. Business dinners replaced home-cooked meals. His phone never stopped buzzing. He'd step out to take calls, always saying, "Just 5 minutes." Sometimes those 5 minutes turned into an hour. I convinced myself it was part of success, that this was what we had worked for. But I missed him. The old him. I remember sitting alone at our dining table one night, food cold, candles half melted, while the clock struck midnight. He came home smelling of whiskey and exhaustion.
"Sorry, babe.
Meeting ran late." He kissed my forehead, distracted, his eyes somewhere else entirely. I smiled and told him it was okay, even when it wasn't. Because when you love someone, you learn to silence the little alarms that try to warn you. His firm became one of the most sought after in the city. Awards, interviews, media attention, Daniel basked in it all. I was proud, truly. But somewhere between his rising fame and my fading career, I started to disappear. I had left my job by then, convinced that supporting him was the right thing to do. "Once things settle," he said, "we'll travel. We'll build the life we dreamed of." So I waited. And waited. People often called us the perfect couple. At parties, they'd say, "You two are made for each other." And we'd smile, playing our parts flawlessly. He'd hold my waist, and I'd lean into him like we were still the same people from that little apartment. But behind the photos and polished smiles, cracks had started to form. He grew quieter, distant. His phone became an extension of his hand. There were text messages he'd hide, calls he'd take in another room. I told myself he was stressed. That success came with its price. I made excuses for him, for us. I thought being patient was love. I thought understanding meant strength. But every time I reached for him, it felt like he was further away. Then came the business trips. They started off rare, once or twice a year, but soon became routine. He'd pack efficiently, kiss me on the forehead, and say, "I'll be back before you know it." I'd wave from the doorway, pretending not to notice that his smile didn't quite reach his eyes anymore. One evening, after another lonely dinner, I found his tie tossed carelessly on the couch, faintly scented with perfume that wasn't mine. My chest tightened, but I pushed the thought away. "It's nothing," I whispered to myself. "He probably hugged someone at a meeting." I clung to logic when my heart already knew the truth. Our conversations became shorter. His laughter rarer. There were nights I'd hear him on the phone, his voice low, gentle, in a way he hadn't spoken to me in months. When I asked who it was, he'd shrug it off. "Just work, Em. Don't worry." But worry became my new routine. Every silence between us grew heavier. Every lie, small or big, left a mark I couldn't erase. I started to feel like a guest in my own marriage, walking on eggshells around the man who once vowed to protect my heart. Still, I smiled. I cooked his favorite meals. I told myself this was just a phase. Because when you've built your world around someone, the idea of losing them feels like losing yourself. I remember the last morning before his conference trip. He kissed me goodbye, his suitcase by the door, his cologne filling the air. "I'll call you tonight," he said, smiling that practiced smile. And I believed him like I always did. Looking back now, maybe that was the moment I should have known. The distance in his eyes wasn't exhaustion. It was detachment. The warmth in his voice wasn't love. It was habit. Maybe I was too blinded by love to see what was right in front of me. For a moment, I couldn't move. My hand still rested on the doorknob, trembling, cold. The hallway lights flickered softly, painting the beige walls in a faint gold that felt far too gentle for what I was about to see. Daniel's voice echoed faintly from inside. Low, casual. The way he sounded when he was relaxed. It was a tone I hadn't heard in months. I turned the key slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs, so hard it felt like it would bruise from the inside. The lock clicked, a sound so small, yet it split the world in half. The door creaked open, and the first thing that hit me wasn't the sight, but the smell. His cologne. That deep, woody scent I used to love, the one that clung to his shirts and made me feel safe. Now it mixed with something else, perfume, floral, foreign. The room was dimly lit. The city lights outside spilled through the curtains, casting soft lines across the carpet. And there he was. Daniel. Shirt half-buttoned, hair messy, his hand frozen mid-gesture, as if he could undo what I was seeing just by not moving. Beside him, sitting on the edge of the bed, was a woman. Blonde hair falling over bare shoulders. A white shirt, his shirt. Her knees were drawn close, her face turned away, but it didn't matter. The silence said everything her face didn't need to. For a second, no one spoke. It was as if time itself held its breath. My brain tried to make sense of it, to explain it away. Maybe I had the wrong room. Maybe this was some cruel misunderstanding. But then Daniel spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "Emily. Just my name. Nothing else. No apology. No panic. Just disbelief, the kind that carried guilt beneath it." I stared at him, waiting for him to move, to laugh, to tell me this was all some terrible mistake. But he didn't move. He didn't even reach for me. He just stood there, staring, as if I was the intruder in his secret life. My throat went dry. "You're supposed to be at a meeting." He swallowed hard, eyes flicking toward the woman, then back to me. "I can explain." Explain. That word. As if betrayal could be reasoned into something less than it was. I wanted to scream, to throw the bottle of champagne still in my hand, to demand answers that I already knew would destroy me. But instead, all I could do was stare. The gift box in my other hand pressed painfully against my palm. The woman, Sophie, I would later remember hearing that name in one of his late-night calls, finally looked up. Her eyes were wide, glassy, but not with remorse. More like she'd been caught doing something she knew was wrong, but thought she'd never be found out. She whispered, "I didn't know you were." I cut her off with a glance. Not cruel, not angry, just tired. "Don't," I said quietly. "Don't lie for him." Daniel took a step toward me, his voice trembling. Emily, please. It's not what it looks like. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of how ridiculous it sounded, the oldest line in the book. Then tell me, Daniel, I said, my voice breaking. What does it look like to you? He said nothing. The silence was heavy, unbearable. I could hear the faint hum of the city through the windows, the buzz of the air conditioner, even the slow, steady rhythm of my own heart, pounding, desperate, lost. For 7 years, that man had been my world. I had given up everything to stand beside him, my career, my independence, my time, my trust. And here he stood, in a hotel room with another woman, looking at me like I was the one who didn't belong. I took a small step back, the edge of the carpet brushing my heels. My vision blurred. I blinked hard, forcing the tears to stay where they were. Crying now would make it real. And I wasn't ready for that. Do you love her? I heard myself ask, though my voice sounded foreign, detached, like it belonged to someone else. Daniel hesitated. That was all the answer I needed. Something inside me broke, not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet snap, like a string pulled too tight for too long. I looked at the champagne bottle, still cold in my hand, and the gift box, that stupid silver watch engraved with "Forever Yours." I wondered if he even remembered what today was. He didn't. Of course he didn't. His lips parted as if to speak, but no words came out. And in that silence, I realized I didn't want to hear them. Nothing he could say would stitch back what he'd torn apart. Sophie stood then, clutching the sheet around her like it could shield her from guilt. I should go, she murmured, her voice shaky. No, I said, surprising even myself. Stay. I want you to see this too. I held up the box between us, my fingers trembling. Do you know what this is, Daniel? He shook his head, slightly confused. It's a gift, I said, voice hollow. For you. For us. He reached for it, but I pulled it back. You don't deserve it. I turned the box over in my hands, watching the light glint off the ribbon. 7 years. 7 years I believed in you, defended you, loved you. And this is how you repay me, with cheap lies and hotel keys. Emily, please, he tried again, softer this time. It just happened. I didn't mean. Don't, I whispered, cutting him off. You don't accidentally end up in a hotel room with someone from work, Daniel. You make choices. And you made yours. My chest ached. The air felt thick, heavy. Every breath hurt. For a brief moment, I remembered the early days, the laughter, the plans, the vows whispered beneath the stars. The man standing in front of me was a stranger wearing my husband's face. And that was the cruelest part, realizing the person I had loved most in the world had been slowly disappearing, and I hadn't even noticed. I turned to leave, my feet moving on instinct. Daniel called after me, but I didn't stop. Each step toward the door felt like peeling away another layer of pain. When my hand reached the handle, I paused. The weight of the champagne bottle pulled at my fingers. I looked back one last time. He was standing there, helpless, his expression caught between fear and guilt. Sophie was silent, her eyes downcast. Do you know what today is? I asked softly. He blinked, confused. What? Our anniversary. My voice cracked on the word. 7 years, Daniel. 7 years today. He flinched, realization dawning too late. I smiled faintly, not out of happiness, but because there was nothing left to lose. Happy anniversary, I whispered, the words catching like smoke in my throat. Then I left. The hallway outside felt colder than before. The air was sharp, sterile, the kind that stings when you breathe too deeply. My shoes clicked against the floor, steady, deliberate. Behind me, the door shut with a soft thud, final, irreversible. In my hand, the champagne bottle hung heavy, the box still clutched tight. I couldn't bring myself to drop it. It was all that was left of the version of me that believed in us. As I stepped into the elevator, my reflection in the mirrored walls didn't look like me anymore. My eyes were dull, my face pale, my lips trembling. But somewhere beneath the heartbreak, something new flickered, something I didn't recognize yet. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't peace. It was colder.
Sharper.
The doors closed slowly, sealing the silence around me. The last thing I whispered, barely audible, as the floor numbers lit one by one, was meant for no one but him. Happy anniversary, Daniel. And with that, the woman who walked out of that hotel was not the same one who had walked in. The rain had no mercy that night. It fell in angry sheets against the windshield, blurring the road ahead until the world looked as broken as I felt inside. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles pale, breath uneven. The gift bag sat on the passenger seat, crumpled now, soaked from the rain I'd walked through to my car. Inside it, the engraved watch I'd spent weeks choosing for Daniel. To forever, it read. The irony twisted like a knife. Every traffic light bled into the next, red and haunting, like the warning signs I had ignored for years. My mind replayed every lie in slow motion. His voice calling her name, his shirt half-buttoned, her perfume lingering in the room that was supposed to be ours. I could still hear the soft click of the door when I'd left, that sound, small and final, echoing louder than his betrayal ever should have. I didn't remember driving home. The wipers swayed back and forth, but the tears blurred everything anyway. My body trembled, not from the cold, but from disbelief. How long? I whispered into the empty car. The silence answered. When I reached the house, it didn't feel like home anymore. The walls that once held laughter now closed in around me, suffocating, heavy with deceit. I dropped the gift on the floor. It landed with a dull thud, the same sound my heart made when I saw him with her. I sank to my knees, the weight of years crashing down. Every memory stabbed at me. The dinners I cooked, the nights I waited up, the dreams we built together. All of it, wasted. The clock on the wall ticked, cruelly steady. I walked to our wedding photo hanging above the mantel. Us smiling, his hand on mine.
Perfect. Fake.
Without thinking, I slammed it to the ground. The glass shattered into 1,000 glittering pieces. Tiny reflections of a love that never really existed. I stared at my own face in one of the shards, red eyes, trembling lips, mascara running like bruises. Who are you? I whispered. Hours passed, but time had lost meaning. My phone buzzed, his messages lighting up the screen. Emily, please call me. Let's talk. You misunderstood. I stared at his words until the letters blurred. Then one by one I deleted them all. With each swipe, something inside me hardened.
I didn't sleep that night.
The rain kept drumming against the windows, relentless, like it was trying to wash away my denial. Every creak of the house felt like a ghost of my former life. I made tea at 3 a.m. and didn't drink it. I sat by the window, knees pulled to my chest, watching the world move on while mine had stopped. By morning, the storm outside had eased, but the one inside me was just beginning. The bed looked untouched, cold on his side, empty on mine. I lay there for a while, tracing the spot where he used to rest his hand on my waist. I could still feel the ghost of his warmth. I could still hear his promises. You're my forever.
Lies, all of them. Grief is strange.
It doesn't arrive all at once. It creeps in, filling the smallest cracks. I cried until my throat burned, then I stared at nothing until I forgot what day it was. I stopped answering calls, stopped eating, stopped existing. My world became a loop of silence and sorrow. But somewhere between heartbreak and exhaustion, something inside me shifted. It wasn't forgiveness, no, that was gone. It was something colder.
Clearer.
I stood before the mirror one night, eyes swollen, face pale, and said aloud, if he could pretend all these years, so can I. The sound of my voice startled me. It didn't sound broken anymore. It sounded steady, controlled, the kind of calm that hides storms beneath it. That night, I cleaned up the shattered frame, every shard glinting like a reminder. I tucked the photo away in a drawer, far from sight. I washed my face, brushed my hair, and looked at my reflection again. For the first time in weeks, I didn't see a victim. I saw a woman who had been deceived, but not destroyed. I made a choice then, not to confront him. Not yet. He would expect tears, shouting, accusations. But what he would never expect was silence. Silence has power. It unsettles, it confuses, it creates fear where guilt already lives. So I smiled, faint but certain. You think I don't know? I whispered to the empty room. But I do. And one day, Daniel, you'll wish I never found out. Outside, the rain had stopped. The world was still drenched, glistening in the streetlights. I watched the last drop slide down the glass and disappear. Just like my old life. Just like the woman who believed in forever. In her place stood someone new, quieter, stronger, colder. The night that broke me also rebuilt me.
Piece by piece.
And though he didn't know it yet, the storm had only just begun. They say the first thing revenge steals is the right to be surprised. I decided I would keep that right for myself. I started small. The way you undo a wound without tearing the skin open. No outbursts, no tears in public. Only quiet, deliberate steps. For days I practiced my face in the mirror. Calm, polite, the same woman who still answered his calls with soft concern. People never suspect the one who looks composed. My phone became a tool, not a tether. I set up a separate email, a burner number, and started to dig. At first it felt obscene, to search through the life I had helped build, but anger sharpens focus. I read through his calendar entries, cross-checked meeting locations, and traced his patterns. Business dinners, late edits, weekend conferences. A map of excuses. I bookmarked names, places, and dates. Every little inconsistency looked like a thread. Pull one, see the others fray. I watched him like a ghost in the background of his own life. When he left for work, I followed at a distance one morning, not to confront, but to observe. He didn't expect to be watched. He didn't expect me to be competent. That made it easier. He met people in out-of-the-way cafes, not glossy boardrooms. He laughed too easily, touched arms too often. He didn't think the woman who had packed his lunches and ironed his shirts would ever study his calendar with a kind of interest usually reserved for tax. Next, I needed proof that mattered. Love affairs sting in the heart, but business lies ruin reputations. I started poking into his firm's files. I made friends where it counted. The receptionist, the assistant who answered late calls, an exhausted junior architect who wanted to be noticed. I listened more than I spoke. People love to talk to someone who won't judge them. In coffee rooms and elevator waits, details spilled out. Contracts with vague clauses, invoices that didn't match deliverables, a shell. I kept everything organized in a folder on a thumb drive, labeled simply, evidence. Each file was a small victory. An email with a terse approval, a courier receipt, a scanned contract, a photo of Daniel signing a document while his other hand typed on a private tablet. I stared at those documents at night until the shapes of numbers and dates blurred. But the blur never softened the truth. I learned to smile at his charity openings and ribbon cuttings. I clapped with everyone else while I cataloged the cracks. He looked at me sometimes with that old mix of pride and entitlement. He liked the illusion as much as I had once loved it. That was his weakness. The show meant everything to him. Reputation was a currency he spent freely, and I intended to bankrupt him with it. Networking was surgical. I reached out to a former colleague of his who'd been quietly pushed out years earlier. He was bitter, and bitterness can be a stubborn ally. With careful questions and shared wine, he handed me pieces of a puzzle. Names of shell companies, dates of suspicious transfers, hints of a partner who kept his hands clean while others did the dirty work. I bought the man dinner, and he laid out a map. He pointed to companies with no real offices, shell names that evaporated when searched, and a pattern of payments timed after award ceremonies and board votes. It was precise, ugly, and infuriatingly thorough. I swallowed and nodded. There were nights I wanted to call Daniel and scream until my throat closed. There were mornings I stared at the watch I never gave him and wondered how many. I felt anger like a living thing inside me, pacing and waiting. But I held it back, turned it into preparation. Revenge, I learned, is patient. It waits, it watches, it learns. To keep him unsuspecting, I played the old role. I returned his texts with care, kept the house immaculate, laughed at his jokes at gatherings, and made sure I was seen at his side. People applauded the couple that stood together while the husband glowed in his success. The performance was painful and precise. In every room, my smile was a contract I signed with myself. Look harmless, be harmless, then strike. I hired a private investigator under a business pretext. He found more than I'd imagined: offshore accounts, invoices routed through anonymous companies, payments labeled as consulting that led to purchases tied to Daniel's projects. Each revelation tightened the knot in my chest and widened the scope of what I could do legally to make him answer for both personal and professional deceit. But I didn't want Rowan for Rowan's sake. I wanted him exposed in a way that meant something. I imagined the boardroom where his peers sat in linen and leather, the cameras in the press room, the slow, horrified slide of his smile as numbers and names were revealed. I wanted the same eyes that congratulated him to catalog the evidence and watch his empire wobble. Humiliation would only be a byproduct. The point was accountability. There were risks. Word could leak. Allies could switch. I slept in short bursts, always aware someone might notice my pattern and ask, "What are you planning?" But the more I uncovered, the more careful I became. Encrypted files, backup drives hidden in false bottom drawers, newspaper clippings duplicated for redundancy. I learned to trust paper and pixels more than people. At times, I felt absurdly alone. I had not confided in my closest friend. I couldn't risk it. The fear of being pitted, of being seen as a woman driven by emotion, kept me quiet. It was easier to be the composed spouse in public and the relentless investigator in private. The divide made me sharper. As the pieces fell into place, my grief cooled into strategy. I rehearsed questions I would never ask aloud. I planned meetings I would never walk into. I drew the line between drama and justice, reminding myself that exposure must be clean, legally sound, and undeniable. No theatrical confessions in a hotel hallway. No messy arguments leaked to tabloids. I would let facts speak louder than accusations. On a Sunday afternoon, I sat by the window with a thumb drive and a folder of photocopies. The rain had come back, a soft, steady patter that made the city seem smaller, contained. I put on a coat and walked to a small cafe where Daniel's old colleague liked to sit. I dropped the drive into his hand and watched him read. His face went pale, then angry, then solemn. He nodded once, slow, confirming he understood what I had. The look in his eyes said what words didn't. This could end him. I smiled then. Not the trembling smile of a woman who had been betrayed, but a smile that was precise and thin, the kind that hides knives. It felt foreign on my face, but it fit. He taught me betrayal. I'll teach him consequences. Every plan looks perfect until people start acting like people. For weeks, everything had moved with the precision I'd built into it. My emails, my meetings, my quiet alliances, they fit together like a chessboard I controlled. But Daniel wasn't stupid. He had built his empire on suspicion, and something in him must have felt the shift in air. He started coming home early. He asked strange questions about my days, about who I'd met for lunch, about why I'd suddenly started dressing better, smiling more. "You look different," he'd said one evening, his voice too calm. Happier, maybe. The way he looked at me wasn't love, it was calculation. He was reading me, searching for cracks, and I knew he'd found one. Then there was Sophie, the woman I'd caught him with. She was still in his company, always hovering in his shadow, the ghost I could never fully erase. At first, she'd ignored me, treating me like a name that didn't matter. But now, she smiled too sweetly when we crossed paths at company events. Her eyes lingered too long. She knew something, or thought she did. My first real setback came when I trusted the wrong person. Her name was Lily, Daniel's assistant. I'd built a quiet friendship with her, pretending to be the forgiving wife, the one who'd moved past the rumors. She was young, ambitious, and eager to gossip. I thought I could use that. I didn't realize she'd been loyal to Daniel all along. It started with a missing file. A small one, a printout of an internal memo linking Daniel's company to a fraudulent contract. I'd left it in my study, under a stack of notes. When I went back, it was gone. That night, Daniel mentioned offhandedly. Be careful leaving things around. Sophie's been warning me that people love to misunderstand success. He smiled while pouring his drink. I froze. The air around us turned heavy, suffocating. He knew. From that day, I felt watched. My phone buzzed at odd hours, unknown numbers flashing and disappearing. My emails occasionally failed to send. When I walked into a room at one of his events, conversations paused. Laughter died mid-breath. I realized the quietest form of war isn't fought with weapons. It's fought with whispers. Then came the dinner. The one that almost broke me. Daniel invited me, insisting it would be good for optics. A high-end restaurant, all glass and candlelight, with a view of the city. I didn't want to go, but declining would have looked suspicious. When I arrived, Sophie was already there, seated beside him, radiant in a dress I recognized, one I had once worn on our anniversary trip. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. The table was full of investors, partners, and reporters. Daniel played the perfect husband, introducing me as the heart behind his success. Every word dripped with irony. Then, halfway through dinner, he dropped the act. He turned to me, glass in hand, and said, Emily's been trying to learn more about the business lately. It's cute, really. She thinks she can handle the numbers. The laughter that followed was sharp and cruel. I felt my throat tighten. My palms burned. I wanted to scream, to throw the truth in his face, but I didn't. Instead, I smiled. That was worse than crying, and he knew it. When the dinner ended, I went to the restroom and locked myself in a stall. My reflection in the mirror looked hollow, ghost-like. The strength I'd built, the armor of control. I felt it cracking. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was playing a game I didn't understand. For days after, I did nothing. I didn't check my messages, didn't open my laptop. I stayed in bed, listening to the rain against the window. The sound used to calm me. Now it mocked me. My mind replayed every step, every risk, every moment I thought I had the upper hand. The loneliness was unbearable. But then, something inside me hardened. The pain that had paralyzed me began to twist into something sharper, clarity. Daniel's laughter at that dinner wasn't victory. It was fear disguised as arrogance. If he had to humiliate me in front of others, it meant he was trying to control the narrative. That meant I still threatened him. So I got up. I opened my laptop again. The files were still there, duplicates, encrypted, safe. He hadn't found everything. Lily might have betrayed one piece, but not the whole puzzle. I realized then that betrayal wasn't something you escaped once. It was something you learned to survive repeatedly. I met with the private investigator again, this time under a different alias, a new phone. He looked at me with quiet concern. You sure you want to keep going? He's getting nervous. I nodded. Good. Nervous people make mistakes. That night, I wrote Daniel's name on a piece of paper and crossed it out. It wasn't superstition. It was ritual. A small reminder that power, no matter how loud it seems, can still be undone in silence. Sophie could watch. Daniel could mock. The world could doubt me. But the truth was still mine to deliver. He may have power, but I have nothing left to lose. The night of Daniel's biggest victory was the night I chose for his downfall. The invitation came gilded, embossed with the company logo, an evening gala celebrating 10 years of innovation and integrity. I almost laughed when I read that word. Integrity. For years, Daniel had worn it like a suit tailored to perfection, hiding every stain underneath. Tonight, I would strip it away. The ballroom glowed with sterile opulence. Chandeliers spilled light like liquid glass, the air thick with perfume, champagne, and lies. Reporters lined the walls, cameras glinting, while employees and investors mingled with practiced smiles. Daniel thrived in places like this. Crowds adored him, lights worshipped him. But the higher he stood, the harder the fall would sound. I arrived quietly, dressed in black silk, simple, elegant, deliberate. The color of endings. Every step I took echoed softly against the marble, my heart steady in my chest. No hesitation. No second thoughts. My plan had lived too long in the shadows. Tonight, it would breathe. Daniel spotted me as he worked the room, shaking hands, laughing too loudly. For a moment, his confident grin faltered. He hadn't expected me to come. He approached, a little too quickly, glass in hand. "Emily," he said, his voice honeyed with public charm. "You look stunning." I didn't know you'd be here." I smiled. "Of course, Daniel. It's a celebration, isn't it?" Sophie stood a few feet behind him, glittering in silver, eyes darting between us. I saw unease there, something raw, uncertain. Maybe she sensed what was coming, or maybe guilt was finally finding her spine. As the speeches began, the crowd hushed. Daniel took the stage, standing beneath a massive screen displaying the company's motto, "Built on Trust." The irony nearly made me laugh. He started his speech with practiced confidence, words he'd probably rehearsed in the mirror. "This company," he said, "isn't just about architecture. It's about legacy, about honesty, about building something that lasts." A few polite claps followed. My fingers tightened around the small remote in my purse, the one linked to the presentation system. One press, and the truth would speak for itself. But I waited. Timing mattered. When he finished his grand declarations and turned to thank the board, the lights dimmed for a planned slideshow, a tribute to his decade of leadership. That was my cue. I moved to the AV console, unnoticed in the dimness, and slipped the drive into place. The screen flickered once, then twice. The slideshow stuttered and changed. It began with images of Daniel shaking hands with dignitaries, cutting ribbons, posing beside Sophie. The audience clapped uncertainly. Then came the documents, contracts, invoices, emails, projected one after another, large and undeniable. The logos of shell companies, the dates of wire transfers, signatures. My evidence. His empire unmasked. Murmurs rippled through the room. Someone gasped. Cameras started flashing. Daniel's voice broke through the chaos. "Turn it off. Now." But the screen kept rolling. Images of Sophie's private messages appeared. Hotel bookings, secret transfers, emails marked confidential. She covered her mouth, face draining of color. Around her, whispers turned sharp and hungry. The board members shifted in their seats. One of them, an older man named Harris, stood up, his voice trembling with outrage. "Daniel, what is this? These are your signatures. These accounts." Daniel turned toward the technicians, shouting, "Cut the feed." I stepped forward. My heels clicked against the floor, every step loud, deliberate, echoing through the stunned silence. The crowd parted instinctively, eyes turning toward me. "Don't bother," I said softly. "It's already on every journalist's inbox. The truth tends to travel fast." He froze, disbelief etched across his face. "You." "Yes," I said, calm as still water. "Me." A wave of whispers spread through the room. Cameras swiveled toward us. For years, I'd been the quiet one, the background to his spotlight. Now, the light was mine, and I didn't even have to raise my voice. Daniel stepped closer, his mask slipping. "You don't know what you've done, Emily." I looked at him, really looked, the man who once swore he couldn't breathe without me, now gasping for control. "No, Daniel. I finally know exactly what I'm doing." Sophie tried to speak, but her words stumbled out. "Daniel, is it true? Did you?" He turned on her with a glare so cold it silenced her. That was when she understood. She was never his partner, only his pawn. Her expression crumbled, a silent collapse in front of flashing cameras. Security guards moved uncertainly near the exits, unsure who to follow, what to stop. The board members whispered among themselves, phones lighting up with alerts. The company stock, someone muttered, was already plummeting. Daniel reached out, as if to plead or perhaps to intimidate. "Emily, please. Let's talk privately." I stepped back, shaking my head. "You talked privately with too many people, Daniel. This conversation belongs to everyone now." He stood frozen under the lights, sweat glistening at his temple, his practiced charm unraveling. The audience watched the transformation, the powerful man shrinking under the weight of his own lies. For a long moment, no one moved. The only sound was the hum of the projector and the relentless clicking of camera shutters. Then I turned and began to walk toward the doors. My steps echoed through the silence like a metronome of finality. Behind me, voices rose, shocked, angry, scandalized. Someone called my name, another demanded statements. I didn't answer. As I passed Sophie, she looked at me with glassy eyes, whispering, "He used me too, didn't he?" I met her gaze. "He uses everyone." She nodded once, tears spilling, and for the first time, I felt no anger toward her, only pity. At the exit, I paused. Through the tall windows, flashes of lightning illuminated the city below. Brief, violent bursts of light in the storm. Poetic, I thought. Fitting. I turned back one last time. Daniel stood on the stage, shoulders heaving, his perfect composure in ruins. Around him, the company's motto still glowed faintly on the screen, "Built on trust." The words looked broken now, hollow. He searched for me in the crowd, his eyes wild, but I was already fading into the darkness beyond the doors. Outside, the rain had started again, soft at first, then harder, drumming against the pavement. I didn't run for cover. I let it soak into my dress, my hair, washing away years of illusion. As I walked to my car, the city lights blurred behind the rain-smeared glass. Reporters would write their headlines, investors would panic, and Daniel would face the wreckage he'd built with his own hands. I didn't need to add a single word. Somewhere deep inside, the ache was still there, the echo of love, the ghost of what I'd lost. But it was quieter now, gentler. I had given pain purpose. I opened my car door, took one last look at the glowing tower in the distance, and whispered into the night. I didn't need to destroy him. The truth did. The city I chose wasn't extraordinary. It didn't promise new beginnings or wipe away the past. But it was quiet, and quiet was all I needed. The first morning there, I woke to sunlight spilling through sheer curtains, painting soft gold across bare walls. No echoes of arguments, no lingering scent of his cologne. Just me, my breath, and the hum of life outside my window. Starting over wasn't dramatic. It was painfully slow, like teaching yourself how to walk again after forgetting what balance feels like. I found a small apartment near the river. 2 rooms, peeling paint, and a balcony that overlooked the city lights. It wasn't much, but it was mine. For the first time in years, I didn't have to share space with someone who lied about loving me. Days bled into nights filled with quiet work. I dusted off my old laptop and opened the design files I hadn't touched in years. At first, my hands trembled. Every color reminded me of something he'd said, "You're wasting your potential," or "Let me handle it." But as the days passed, the designs became mine again. I wasn't creating for approval anymore. I was creating to breathe. Clients came slowly. A cafe owner, a small bookstore, a startup with big dreams and no budget. Each project was a piece of myself stitched back together. And somewhere between the endless coffee cups and midnight edits, I realized I no longer checked my phone for his name. The silence that once screamed at me now felt like peace. Sometimes, the past still found me. A random song, a perfume in the crowd, or the way a couple laughed too loudly at the corner table. It would all come rushing back. But the difference was it no longer broke me. Pain had become a story I once lived, not the one I was still trapped in. One evening, as I sifted through new client emails, I saw a name that made my heart stop.
Sophie.
For a moment, I just stared. Part of me wanted to delete it, to let the ghost stay buried. But curiosity won. Her message was simple, no drama, no excuses. "Emily, I owe you more than an apology. I was blind. I believed his promises, just like you once did. When everything came crashing down, I saw who he truly was, a man who used people until they broke. I left the company. I'm trying to start over too. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed to say thank you for showing me the truth. Sophie." I read it 3 times before closing my laptop. No tears, no anger. Just a quiet understanding. She wasn't my enemy. We were both casualties of the same deception. For the first time, I didn't feel the urge to look back. Weeks later, I stood on my balcony, watching the city shimmer beneath a pale moon. The air was cold, clean, and real. I thought about everything that had happened, the love, the lies, the ruin, and the revenge. And I smiled. Not the bitter kind I used to hide behind, but the kind that comes from finally letting go. I wasn't the woman who walked into that hotel room anymore. She died the night she saw the truth. But from her ashes, someone stronger was born, someone who didn't need revenge to feel whole. Now, when people ask about my past, I tell them it taught me how to rebuild. That betrayal wasn't the end of my story. It was the spark that forced me to find myself again. Sometimes, late at night, I still whisper his name into the dark, not out of longing, but to remind myself how far I've come. The world didn't end when he left. It began. And as the first light of dawn spills through my window, I take a deep breath and whisper the words that saved me. From ashes, I rise. People often say betrayal destroys you. Maybe they're right at first. It tears through your world like a storm, ripping away everything you thought was safe. But once the wreckage clears, you start to see what survived. And sometimes, that's where the truth lives. For a long time, I thought revenge was the cure. I believed exposing Daniel, watching him crumble, would give me peace. And for a brief moment it did. Seeing the truth finally crash down on him, the lies, the arrogance, the mask, it felt like justice. But once the noise faded, I realized justice wasn't about making him fall. It was about learning how to stand again without him. Betrayal didn't just break my marriage. It broke the version of me that thought love meant losing yourself for someone else. I used to measure my worth by how much I could give, how much I could forgive. Now I know, real love doesn't ask you to disappear. In those long, sleepless nights after everything fell apart, I searched for answers that never came. Why did he do it? When did he stop loving me? But somewhere along the way, I stopped asking why he betrayed me and started asking why I ignored the signs. The truth was simple. I wanted the fairy tale more than the reality. I wanted to believe in us, even when us was already gone. That night at the hotel, when I saw him with her, I thought my life ended. I remember the smell of his cologne, the reflection of the city lights on the window, the sound of my own heart breaking. But now, looking back, I see that moment for what it truly was, not the end, but the beginning. That door didn't just reveal his betrayal. It revealed the truth about me, about what I deserved and what I had settled for. Revenge gave me temporary satisfaction, but healing gave me freedom. I learned that silence can be louder than any confrontation, and walking away with dignity can cut deeper than shouting in anger. I didn't destroy him. I simply stepped out of the illusion he built and let the truth finish what I started. What betrayal taught me is this: pain is not a punishment. It's a teacher. It strips you bare, forcing you to rebuild from what's real. It teaches you boundaries, self-respect, and the strength to never beg for love that isn't freely given. Now, when I think about Daniel, I don't feel hate. I feel gratitude, not for what he did, but for what I learned because of it. His betrayal freed me from the version of myself that kept shrinking to fit someone else's comfort. It taught me that revenge doesn't heal you, but walking away stronger than before, that's justice. And maybe that's the real irony of it all. The night that broke me also saved me. That hotel door, the one I wish I'd never opened, became the doorway to my own freedom. I stepped through heartbreak and found clarity. Through loss, I found purpose. If I could speak to the woman I was before that night, I'd tell her this: don't fear the breaking. Fear staying in what's already broken. Because in the end, betrayal didn't define my story. It refined it. It stripped away the lies and left behind something unshakable: me. And that's the lesson I'll carry forever. You can't control how someone betrays you, but you can control how you rise after they do. So now you know my story, how love turned to ashes and ashes turned to strength. I often wonder if I'd do it all the same way again. If I'd still walk into that hotel room, still open that door, Still let the truth destroy the world I'd built. But maybe that destruction was necessary. Maybe that's the only way to find who I was meant to be. If you caught your partner like I did, what would you do? Would you expose them? Let the world see their lies the way you did? Or would you walk away quietly, leaving them to face the mirror of their own guilt? There's no right answer. Some people burn everything down to heal. Others choose silence and peace. I chose both. I lit the fire, and then I walked away. And in that silence, I found myself again. When I look back now, I don't see the woman who was broken by betrayal. I see the woman who learned to rebuild from nothing. Every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt, they all shaped me into someone stronger. Someone unafraid of endings. Because endings are just beginnings in disguise. I think that's what betrayal really teaches you, not how to hurt back, but how to rise without losing your soul. To realize that revenge fades, but dignity stays. As the lights dim in my memory, I picture that final scene, my silhouette walking away under the soft glow of streetlights, the city stretching out before me. No more chaos. No more pretending. Just peace. The kind that only comes when you finally let go. If this story moved you, if you've ever faced betrayal, heartbreak, or the kind of silence that forces you to find your voice again, you're not alone. We've all stood at that crossroads between rage and peace, wondering which path will save us. So tell me, what would you have done? Would you have exposed them? Or would you have walked away like I did, quietly, with your head held high? Share your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your truth, your story, your strength. And if this journey through love, lies, and redemption spoke to your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. There are more stories waiting to be told, stories of betrayal, courage, and the kind of strength that only comes from being broken and choosing to rise anyway.